There's nothing quite like stepping into like someone else's world, and especially someone that is a real life person. Don't get me wrong, I love fiction as well. I love diving into these developed characters, but there's just something about being able to be in the head of a real life person. And memoirs are so fun to get that experience. The number one way to have that experience. So grab a pen and paper. This is part one of memoirs that I highly, highly suggest that everyone reads. Hey y'all, welcome to or welcome back to my channel, Scotty Cherie Reads. So we're talking about memoirs, and for starters, I'm gonna talk about a memoir that kind of breaks the rules of what a typical memoir looks like. So as we know, memoirs are someone else's life story that they write from their own perspective, generally. However, In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado breaks the typical idea of what a memoir is. So she talks about a developing relationship that is spiraling into an abusive relationship with her girlfriend. And the way that she tells this story isn't necessarily linear, but she also goes into like narrative tropes for this relationship, which is very hard to explain. I'll show you here. It says dream house as world building, dream house as set design, dream house as thanks Obama, dream house as sex and death. And what she talks about goes into the psychological abuse and sometimes physical abuse of this relationship, but it also is sometimes critiquing that narrative trope as well. So it says here, it also, not only does she shed light on a queer abusive relationship, because we can get into there's not enough representation of that, but she also figures out how to have a critical eye over legal proceedings, fairy tales, iconic works of film and fiction, and a broad swath of queer history, and so much more. It's almost like the writing in here is poetry. Even though this isn't a poetry book, the writing and prose is just that beautiful and engaging. I think that Carmen Maria Machado was so insanely vulnerable when writing this book, and you can sincerely tell that in this story. It's electrifying, it's captivating, it's sad, I shed tears. It's a small read. It should be quick to get through. Obviously, there's a lot of blank space in here, as you can tell. It took me a while to get through this book because it's intentional with the hard-hitting words and themes to sit and process what is actually going on in this story. And it's just so unique. I hope that I did an okay job with explaining this book. It's just, you have to just go into it knowing what I've said, and I promise you, you will love it. Look at the trigger warnings. Obviously, it's about a domestic violence situation. But yeah, and going back to the queer domestic violence, I think especially between two women, which is the case in this story, we don't see that represented a lot, because sometimes people just think like, oh, it's two women, they can't really be domestic abuse, like just like two men, like it has to be a big brawling man and a little wimpy woman, and that's what we care about, and we don't really give two shits about domestic violence that happens in all types of relationships. But yeah, this is a 5 out of 5 star read. I've read this multiple times. I reread this often. It's such a good piece. Like, I'm so glad that Carmen Maria Machado was able to be that vulnerable and write this masterpiece. This next book, I am being so serious about this. It is probably the most informative and at the same time powerful book I've ever read, nonfiction or fiction. And I think that every person in school should read this book. It should be mandatory reading for everyone. And that is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. So if you don't know, Chanel Miller is a sexual assault survivor from the very famous Stanford case. I'm not going to name her assailant because his name was said way too much, and the focus was on him for this whole case, which you'll get in dirty detail in this book. But Chanel Miller basically was Jane Doe throughout the whole case for this sexual assault that happened to her on this campus. And for good reason, honestly, because the way people treated her in comparison to her assailant is mind-blowing. She goes into the gritty details of what happened to her. She is insanely informative in a very captivating way. It's not boring at all about the criminal justice system when there is a sexual assault or rape case. She goes into the injustice of it all and the longevity of how long it takes to hopefully get justice. And if you don't, spoiler alert, in her case, she definitely didn't get justice, in my opinion. How long and that it takes and how much it uproots your life, and the psychological effects, the physical effects that this has on just one person and her family, and how this one event has spider webbed out and has affected so many people's lives. It's just so powerful. And Chanel Miller's writing is fantastic. Like, it's beautiful, it's exquisite, it's captivating, it's thrilling. Like, you don't want to put this book down, even though it is information heavy. I don't know how she does it, and I don't know how she had the strength to step up and say her name, which I'm so glad that she did. I think that this kind of originally started with an essay that she anonymously wrote that went viral online, and eventually chose to, come on out and say, I'm Chanel Miller, this is me, and here's my story. And yeah, it's so good. Read this for book clubs, read this in classes. This is mandatory. If you don't pick anything else up on this list, please give this a read or a listen. Chanel Miller, I believe Chanel Miller narrates the audiobook herself. I'll put it here if I'm wrong, but whoever does it does a great job. So yeah, definitely imperative. Like, you have to read this. The next one on the list comes from one of my all-time favorite authors, journalists, public speakers, and just person in general. And that is Roxane Gay's memoir, Hunger. This tells the story of her personal relationship with food and her self-image, and a horrifying event that happened when she was very young that has morphed her life ever since. I'm trying not to spoil it too much. I do have it here on Goodreads because I listened to an audiobook, which you should do, but I need to buy a copy because I love everything Roxane Gay has put out, and I have physical copies of everything but this. So anyway, it says, a searing, honest memoir of food, weight, self-image, and learning how to feed your hunger while taking care of yourself. Writing about intimacy and sensitivity about food and body, using her own emotional and psychological struggles as a means of exploring our shared anxieties over pleasure, consumption, appearance, and health. I think that's important, that this is very much her own experience, but she makes it so relatable to any person, because everyone's kind of anxious, especially if you're a woman, anxious about self-image, body positivity, or trying to be body positive in just this Western world that we live in. It says, as a woman who describes her own body as, quote, wildly undisciplined, end quote, Roxane understands the tension between desire and denial, between self-comfort and self-care. In Hunger, she explores her past, including the devastating act of violence that acted as a turning point in her young life, and brings readers along on her journey to understand and ultimately save herself. I just am so amazed by Roxane Gay and just telling the truth about her story, because it is heartbreaking. So definitely trigger warnings for anyone, even if you don't think that you have self-image issues or weight issues or food relationship issues. I think it's still triggering in many ways. So just make sure you're going through it slowly, you're taking your time, but it's definitely worth the read. Yeah, I don't know how someone can be that vulnerable. I hope that I could be that vulnerable one day, I mean, that has not happened to me. But yeah, I don't know. I have such a hard time putting these favorites into tangible words. So if that sounds interesting to you, please go check this book out. If that sounds too heavy, then please pick up any of other Roxane Gay's books. I'll put them on the screen here. They're all literally so good. Even just watch her TED Talk, which I'll have linked below, or TED Talks. She is changing the world, and I really appreciate her for that. This next memoir is probably one of the most uplifting and inspirational stories I've ever read. And I didn't think that it was going to be as moving for me when I went into it as it was. And that is Finding Me by Viola Davis. So I've watched some movies with Viola Davis in it, and I follow Viola Davis on Instagram, and she just always just is such a light. Like I don't know, like I'm not like the biggest, well, I don't want to say I'm not the biggest fan because I love what she's doing, especially after this memoir. I want to watch some more things that she's in. But like what she's known for, what's that secretary or How to Get Away with Murder? Like I haven't watched that. It's not really my cup of tea, but I have watched some of the other films, and the ones that I have watched, I'll put some here. She is a fantastic actress. However, getting back to the book, this is her story, and it talks about how she came from nothing. And I want to say New York. Let me look and double check so I'm not telling you wrong. Rhode Island. Central Falls, Rhode Island. And when you say she comes from a poor family, she comes from a poor family, and how she just runs and does what she needs to do in order to get herself out of that situation. And the biggest part of this is her journey of self-love. I relate to this a lot being a dark-skinned woman in America. And for her being in the entertainment industry, it never uplifts you to feel beautiful. And Viola Davis talks about the struggles and the journey that she went through to get to a point where she does love herself and won't just take the stereotypical slave roles or whatever. She puts herself in these spaces and knows her worth. But she talks about how challenging that was and how she's still working through it all of the time, and how you're not alone if you're dealing with that as well. And the writing was great. Definitely listen to the audiobook. It's a theme with these because a lot of the time they read their own, and Viola Davis reads it, and obviously she's an actress, she's a voice actress. It just transports you to her world. Seriously, you feel like you're a fly on the wall watching her world. It's very descriptive in a great way. So yeah, if you need something to tell you to get your booty up, nothing can stop you, don't let people get you down in a not corny way, pick up Finding Me by Viola Davis. Oh, I do want to say that it's not just about acting or breaking into the scene. This is inspirational in general of just understanding and yourself and pushing for your dreams when the world around you tells you you aren't shit and that it's never going to happen for you, period. So yeah, pick it up. This next one is the one that I'm sure you all are anticipating being on the list, and it is. It has a yellow cover, came out a few years ago. I'll give you a couple seconds to figure out what it is or guess. It is, of course, I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. It is on this list because it is that good, I swear. Audiobook, listen to the audiobook. Jeanette McCurdy narrates it herself, and obviously she's an actress, so the voice acting, well, it's not voice acting, let me not say that. You can just tell the raw emotion in her voice about this insanely sick story. So if you don't know, this book talks about Jeanette McCurdy's story of becoming a child star. If you don't know, she starred in iCarly as Sam. I'll put a picture here. And then was so successful that there was a spin-off Nickelodeon show that was solely her show where she was the main star called Sam and Cat. And the story talks about her relationship with her mother and how her mother would do literally anything in order for in order for Jeanette McCurdy to become famous. This includes caloric restriction, eating disorders. Yeah, it's really bad. So I know that sounds really triggering, so take your time going through this book because Jeanette McCurdy doesn't shy away from any of this. There's also a lot of sexual assault things in this book from people that she should trust. If you don't know, there's a big documentary and case that's going on with like 90s, early 2000s Nickelodeon stars. I'm not going to say his name. He's publicized way too much, but he should be under the jail, basically. I'll have the documentary linked below and have it popped up here. I can't think of what it's called, but that talks about the the world of what it was like in the 90s, 2000s underneath this one director. And Jeanette McCurdy talks about it a little bit in this book, but obviously with, you know, legal reasons, she couldn't go deep into it, but she does talk about it a little bit. And it's just sad how not only did her mother fail her in substantial ways, the other adults that were around her in this space also failed her. And it is insanely sad. She talks about how to this day, it still affects her in massive ways, even with undergoing intense therapy for years and years and years. But obviously with the title, I'm Glad My Mom Died, that might sit wrong, or that might be really controversial for a lot of people. But I think Jeanette McCurdy made her point in this story. And that's all I really want to say. It's funny at times, as weird as that is. It's very engaging, but definitely take your time going through it because it is heavy. It's a hard hitter. Look up the trigger warnings, but I think about that book quite often, and it has stuck with me, and obviously a lot of other people, because it's insanely popular for a reason. So pick it up. You know, don't let the hype run you away from it. It is actually that great. All right, last on this list, part 1, but certainly not least, is Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford. So Ashley is a Black woman from Indiana, and this is her debut novel. And as you can tell from the tabs, it is fantastic, as I always say. But this follows her through childhood, adolescence, and adulthood, grappling with the fact that her father has been incarcerated. And at a young age, she doesn't really know why. And, you know, it talks about the looming absence of him and how she wishes she could have a better relationship with him and wants to know kind of what he did to be in jail. Ashley then, progress a little bit further. It talks about sexual assault that happens to her. And she learns that her father is actually incarcerated for, I'm not going to spoil exactly what it is, but it has to do with violence against women. And Ashley just talks about how she is trying to grapple with all of this. It says, somebody's daughter steps into the world of growing up a poor Black girl in Indiana with a family fragmented by incarceration and explores how isolating and complex such a childhood can be. As Ashley battles her body and her environment, she embarks on a powerful journey to find the threads between who she is and what she was born into and the complicated familiar love that often binds them. So very deep, very quick read, but quick in a powerful way, like all of these other ones I've talked about. Ashley's writing is fantastic. I don't think that she has another book out yet, but I am highly anticipating and hope that she puts something else out because this was great. Just another deep dive where you feel like you're a fly on the wall in her story, which is very heavy. So obviously look at the trigger warnings as always, but this one was great and just a random pickup. I think it was just book of the month one month and I was like, hey, that sounds interesting. I haven't heard a story like that before, and it very, very much delivered. So yeah, pick it up if you're interested. All right, y'all, that's it. That's all. Be on the lookout for part 2 of this memoirs I think everyone should read series that's happening on my channel. It should be out in the next couple of weeks. Other than that, if you like what you saw here, please subscribe down below. Leave a comment on what your favorite memoir, or even just nonfiction, but I'm always looking for a good memoir down below. And until then, I'll continue to talk to y'all in the comments. See ya. Bye.